Welcome to another edition of my lightsaber analysis series. Today's video will be focusing on the final confrontation between Vader and Ahsoka Tano on the planet of Malachor. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with this duel, it is from Season 2 of Rebels in the final episode of Twilight of the Apprentice. And even though this is animation, I'd still argue that this is as significant of a duel as Luke taking on Vader in Return of the Jedi. This was a duel that had been in the works for years, according to the creator Dave Filoni, and it is again fueled by wanting to destroy the past, specifically Vader's past. And it's always the emotional undercurrent of these duels which excites me the most. Ahsoka and Vader duel in an underground Sith Temple that doubled as a super weapon, and it's also about the self-destruct. Just like in The Last Jedi, this location carries a lot of visual significance in regard to the confrontation between the light and dark. We see the petrified remains of Jedi and Sith from an ancient battle where Ahsoka herself admits that it looks like neither faction won. And of course, the backstory to the episode itself is that a holocron from this temple has the knowledge that will aid in the destruction of the Sith. You know, that original destiny that Anakin Skywalker had before he got Kenobi'd. This entire temple represents the never-ending war between Jedi and Sith, with Ahsoka and Vader becoming another expression of that cycle. So, initially Ezra Bridger is the one who confronts Vader when he first arrives at the Sith Temple, and the only reason we're given as to why Vader showed up boils down to this event being foretold, that he would face his former apprentice here. While no one says it explicitly, I think it's clear that the Emperor told him as much. And with all the Inquisitors dead, it's left to Vader to retrieve this holocron. Vader overpowered Ezra Bridger, but Ahsoka intervened, and this is where their duel really begins, and it's not with the swing of a blade. Ahsoka and Vader are trying to reason with one another, and Vader even promises that the Emperor will show mercy for Ahsoka, which is a complete lie. After some back and forth, Vader declares to Ahsoka that Anakin Skywalker was weak, in that he destroyed him, rejecting any trace of the former Jedi. And this crushes Ahsoka, as we see her consider what Vader has said. For all we know, she is quickly flashing through every good moment they had together during the Clone Wars. And because of her feelings on that specific loss, originally believing Anakin died during Order 66, Ahsoka ends up telling Vader that she will avenge Anakin's death. And this leads to my favorite exchange in the entire series for Rebels. Vader quips at Ahsoka saying,
"Revenge is not the Jedi way."
And in my head, it's like Vader thinks he's being clever. And Ahsoka gets right down to business, staring at Vader, stating,
"I am no Jedi,"
igniting both of her white lightsabers and getting into her combat formation called Shirkai. And while I understand this lightsaber form comes with its limitations, I truthfully don't see most of these issues when it comes to Ahsoka, at least not for the majority of this specific duel. Vader, on the other hand, gets into a defensive stance, ready for Ahsoka's incoming attack. And from what it looks like, Vader is primarily in Form 5 the entire time, deciding to use his brute strength to overpower his former apprentice. Ahsoka sprints towards Vader. Both sabers are drawn, and at the last moment, Ahsoka leaps into the air, seemingly attempting to kick off Vader's mask. When slowed down, you can see she gets 2 kicks to the face in, falls to the ground as Vader attempts to slice her in 2, and as Vader's blade comes down, it looks like Ahsoka uses Vader's own power against him, bringing both of her blades under his, forcing his blades up and away, which allowed for Ahsoka to get in a potential strike to Vader's body. But as we watch, this fight is basically evenly matched. Strike after strike is blocked by both parties, and finally Ahsoka finds the opportunity to use the Force to physically push Vader away. And in my head, this moment was probably embarrassing to Vader. If one character trait passed over from Anakin into Vader's, it's his arrogant belief in his own power. That belief is partly why he is in that suit, and I think Ahsoka has reminded him of that. Vader looks up to see Ahsoka already in the air, coming in fast for a killing blow, and I thought it was pretty awesome that she used the leverage of their locked blades to push off Vader, flipping over into a crouch before his lightsaber could cut her in half. The way that this fight was choreographed and animated is remarkable. Finally, as Ahsoka comes back up to standing, Vader already anticipates her next strike and brings down his blade immediately onto both of her lightsabers, and for a moment they remain locked up. And to my eyes, it looks like Ahsoka isn't remotely afraid of Darth Vader, not in the slightest. I say this because it looks like he is attempting to intimidate her, but she pushes him back yet again, flipping back backward, avoiding another series of strikes effortlessly. It's amazing to see what the Padawan of Anakin Skywalker has become. It's something that even Darth Vader can barely contend with. As the duel progresses, we end up at the corners of the Sith Temple, and the show gives us this extreme wide shot, giving a sense of epic scale to this battle. Vader is forcing Ahsoka backwards as he uses the only leverage he has against her, which is physical strength. Ahsoka carefully blocks every new strike Vader has until they once again lock up. Vader gains the upper hand on Ahsoka, using the weakness of Jerkai to his advantage, and he forces Ahsoka out of the parry that they are locked in. Vader quickly blocks another incoming strike, and while this was happening, he freed his right hand from his saber, which allowed him to use the Force to push Ahsoka right off the edge of the temple. All we hear is the thud Ahsoka makes as Vader gazes on, lightsaber still ignited. The framing and look of this shot are menacing. What's interesting is during the first part of this duel, the underlying score is pretty heroic sounding to me, which leads me to believe that Ahsoka was more or less in control. But then when we got to that wide shot, the music turned to a more sinister kind of vibe, and the Imperial March itself started to creep in, culminating in Vader's brief victory. And I also love seeing the enormous structure of the Sith Temple behind Vader. It's a very powerful image. As the entire temple is starting to collapse, Vader catches up to Ezra and Kanan, who possess the Sith holocron. Vader is pulling Ezra towards himself, but we can see that Ahsoka has survived her previous fall, and again, she ignites both of her lightsabers and sprints for Vader, going for his head one more time as she did in the beginning, except this time, she takes a slice out of his mask. And in my opinion, it's so that she can finally see Anakin's face for herself, putting her doubts to rest. Ahsoka screaming as she lunges at Vader was kind of heartbreaking in a way, because in this moment, she's giving everything she has to not only avenge her old master, but to save her friends and the future of the galaxy. Basically, the entire OT was allowed to play out because Vader was bested by his former apprentice for a moment. I also think it was brilliant that we heard Vader cry out as well, with the same exact soundbite from Return of the Jedi when Luke overpowers Vader. This is to let us know that this right here truly rocked Vader. And we can see from how Ahsoka falls after this feat how much it's taken out of her. The next thing that happens between these two is fascinating. Ezra yells out Ahsoka's name, and Vader, who is on his knees, hears that name and then says it aloud. But now we hear both Anakin and Vader's voice in unison saying Ahsoka. It's really creepy, but effective at conveying the idea that Vader is a shell around Anakin. And it's clearly a sobering moment of clarity for Ahsoka. She finally hears her master's voice behind that armor, but it's not Anakin making a return in this moment either. A tiny piece of Anakin has become aware in a sense, remembering the name Ahsoka, and he remembers what that name means. But ultimately, that tiny bit of Anakin retreats back into Vader. And it's pretty heartbreaking because Ahsoka thinks he's back for a second and says that she won't leave him this time. And us fans of the Clone Wars remember that Ahsoka left the Order in season 5. It literally ends with Anakin staring at Ahsoka watching her leave. So for us, it looks like Vader is contemplating her words, but as I said earlier, it's just a complete rejection of reality, with Anakin retreating back into Vader, and he ignites his saber, telling Ahsoka then she will die, and they continue their duel. Now, if you watch the series in real time, you never got to see the rest of this duel play out. You see the beginning, but then the Sith Temple explodes, we see Vader limping out of the destruction, clearly in bad shape, and we get this blink and you'll miss it glimpse of Ahsoka coming out of the temple and then falling to the ground. But thanks to the episode A World Between Worlds, which resulted in Ezra pulling Ahsoka into a realm beyond space and time for a brief moment, we got to see what almost could have happened at the end of this duel had Ezra not intervened. And you might end up disagreeing with my final take, and that's entirely okay. But back inside the temple, after Ahsoka had force pushed Ezra back to safety initially, the duel picks back up, and at first it seems like it's back in that stalemate territory, with Ahsoka easily deflecting every incoming blow from Vader. But soon it's clear that Ahsoka is tiring. Vader's brute strength is relentless. Ahsoka uses the Force to get out of the lightsaber lock that they are in. Vader gets pushed back, and the same Force pushes Ahsoka back, giving her time to stab both of her blades into the temple floor, causing it to fracture. But even though Vader would have definitely fallen down into whatever all of this is, it is my belief that had Ezra not intervened from the world between worlds, Vader would have decapitated Ahsoka first and then fallen into this pit. So from a certain point of view, Vader would have won this duel not out of skill, but out of his brute strength in the end. But fate intervened. And it would have been really insane for Filoni to decide to have Ezra Bridger watching the decapitation of Ahsoka in this realm as some kind of lesson. That probably would have actually ruined some childhoods out there, so good move for not doing that. Plus, it allowed for such an enigmatic ending for the character of Ahsoka in this series. We all want to know now what the hell is going on with Ahsoka. What is she up to? What is she turned into now? But that's a completely different video. Wrapping up my analysis and recap of this duel, I'd say it is one of the best examples of two Force users at their peak going at it. And the extra layer that I love about it is that it's basically Darth Vader versus himself. Ahsoka learned to be this cunning warrior that she is now because of her former master, Anakin Skywalker. And yeah, she's naturally gifted in the Force. And although Ahsoka isn't a Jedi per se, whatever she is, it's a worthy adversary, if not equal adversary in most ways, to Darth Vader. And lastly, if you have not watched the Clone Wars or Rebels, I highly suggest it because of the context it gives to the movies. I don't think that every episode is perfect, but there are some from each series that I'd say are worthy of being given a fair shake if you are a hardcore fan. So I hope you have enjoyed this slightly different lightsaber duel analysis. May the Force be with you, and AT-AT is signing off.